We've previously taken a look at the major themes within early Chinese society. Now it's time to take a look at 3 different philosophies. All right, we're not using the phrase religion because these philosophies were designed not only to govern society, but they were also designed to apply to governance and determine how one should live and rule. The first philosophy is known as Confucianism. Now the man you see here, Confucius, tried to secure a political position, but he failed. However, his teachings were collected by his students into a series of books known as the Analects. Now, Confucian thought was centered around the family unit, and the way in which families interacted with one another were designed to serve as a bridge into becoming productive members of society. Each person had their place and individual duties in the social hierarchy of the time, and all children were expected to demonstrate filiality, obedience, reverence, and love of their parents. This respect that the youth were supposed to hold for their elders was known as filial piety and extended to how individuals would act as members of the state. Now, the carrying on of the family name and lineage explains why sons were traditionally more revered than daughters, and why in the era of China's one-child policy, daughters were more likely to be, as it were, looked down upon as opposed to sons. Now basically, life consists of what are called unequal relationships. If the superior party behaves properly and benevolently, the inferior party will respond with obedience and deference. There's a heavy emphasis on education here. All right, so father, son, ruler, minister, all of these are dominant, subordinate, except friend to friend. That one is the only equal relationship. And patriarchy does, in a sense, mean a male-dominated society. Women needed to be well-educated so that they could serve their husbands, and boys needed to be educated so they could control their lives. These are the basic tenets of Confucian thought. So after Confucianism, we turn to Taoism. Allegedly, Lao Tzu was an archivist who wrote a collection of poems. Then he vanished into the wilderness on his water buffalo, and so little is known about him that the very existence of a Lao Tzu has been called into question. His way of thinking, which became known as Taoism, was the main counter or complement, we might say, to Confucianism, and actually stressed the opposite theories. Withdrawal from the empty formalities of Confucianism, withdrawal from rigid hierarchies, and the distractions of society. Classic of the Way of Virtue, the main text of Taoism, is difficult to understand, but is filled with poetic images, ambiguity, and it also hints at various truths that can't necessarily be adequately explained with mere words. Now again, Taoism mainly stipulates that one must withdraw from the world and into nature, and it spotlights nature and its patterns. Now, the material world in which we live blocks us from understanding a higher reality, so withdrawing into nature helps us in this regard. Education, knowledge, and rational analysis were also obstacles to this understanding. Taoism emphasizes more of a union with nature, whereas Confucianism stressed the desire to live in harmony with nature. Ultimately, inaction leads to desired outcomes, and a tranquil existence can be achieved by retreating from the stresses and obligations of everyday society. Give up learning and put an end to your troubles is a quote of Taoism. Now, the image you see on the screen, the Yin and Yan, comes from Taoism. The male principle is the yin, and it's associated with the sun. It's active, bright, and shining. The female principle, the yang, is associated with the moon and is passive, shaded, and reflective. And this concept was often viewed as emphasizing the balance in everyday life, although as patriarchy became more firmly entrenched in Chinese society, the yin does start to take precedence over the Yan. Now, Taoism is often viewed as complementing Confucianism rather than conflicting with it. There's famous examples of administrators whose lives are governed by Confucian principles and they apply Confucian laws. They go home into their garden and read poetry, which is Taoism. Now, the final system that definitely operates on a different level is legalism. Legalism was popularized by the man you see here, Han Fei. And at one time, he was actually the student of a Confucian teacher. The Chinese term for legalism translates to House of Administrative Methods, and it's designed to be a realistic way of viewing and interacting with the world politically. Confucianism, Taoism were viewed as simply more theory-based. Now, Han Fei was born an aristocrat into the family that would eventually succeed the Qin. And the Qin really are the only dynasty that solely employed legalist methods. And the long and the short of it is this. Han Fei regarded the intellectual elite as corrupt and a disturbance to the law because all they cared about was books and their literature. The goal with legalism is to build a rich state and powerful army and to ensure domestic tranquility. The context of this thought is that China was emerging from what was called the Warring States era and was looking for a method of rule that would stabilize internal relations while also providing protection against possible invaders. Human beings were viewed as selfish and covetous, and really, you shouldn't expect any of them to remain virtuous. Now, the idea holds that if everyone channeled their selfish natures into serving the state via agriculture and warfare, everyone would win. Administrators would benefit from a system of ranks, while also not subverting the authority of the ruler. Now, the harshness with which justice and laws were administered contributed to why it fell out of favor after the Han succeeded the Qin. So Confucianism, Taoism, and legalism, all Eastern philosophies, all principles by which the Chinese used at various points to rule over and govern their societies.